Welcome back. My name is Isaiah Newkirk, and today we are chatting about how you can decipher when and if USA Cycling's new Olympic Development Academy would be the best development path for young cyclists. The hope here is to guide young cyclists, parents, and other advisors that are debating whether or not this investment is the best path for a particular rider to explore. So to explore this, we are going to go through 3 different categories to decide if a rider is well matched for the program. The categories are metrics and or performance criteria, experience, and maturity or personality. But first, let's cover even what the Olympic Development Academy is. So the ODA was recently announced by USAC to pretty mixed reviews. And direct from the USAC's website, they define it as USA Cycling's Olympic Development Academy exists to elevate young riders to the elite ranks of international cycling, providing world-class coaching, comprehensive training curriculums, and immersive competition schedules. The academy is meant for riders to have a desire to take control of their future in the sport. So, okay, yes, but what does that actually mean, and what does the program provide, and what really is it? So I recently spoke with Jim Miller on my podcast, The Training Edge, and Jim is the high performance director at USAC, and between that and combing through quite a bit of loose verbiage on USAC's webpage, I think I've put together what the program is focused on. By the way, if you're wanting to listen to that podcast I did with Jim Miller, you can find that by searching the Training Edge podcast, and we will include that below. So again, what exactly is the ODA? It is a new pathway for developing young cyclists across multiple cycling disciplines. The pathway is not the national team, so that's important to keep in mind. Those that are in the hunt for the national team are, in a way going to be world class. So they are on kind of another level of a talent and ability. The ODA is instead to provide another pathway where riders who are not at the tip top of the pool, but instead are, maybe a little bit less along in their development path. And that gives them another pathway and another way of getting to big races and developing under a pretty large umbrella. So you might be wondering, if this isn't a pathway for the national team, then what is the pathway? So this pathway, or this program, is first a curriculum. They split these curriculums into semesters, during which you are staying at a world-class facility. So I'm assuming that is the Olympic Training Center and other USAC facilities in Europe. The curriculum also is access to coaches, sports scientists, and strength coaches. However, it does seem limited just to the competitions, camps, and clinics that you have access to that. So those coaches, I know through chatting with Jim that he has received some requests from pretty high-level coaching individuals to be part of this program. So I do think it'll be pretty world-class level coaching. Training camps is another thing that's provided with the national team members, potentially. You also get performance monitoring with rider assessment and monthly performance assessment, nutritional reviews on a semester basis, and a big one that really stood out to me is a quote-unquote ongoing network collaboration with professional teams and opportunities. While exactly what that means is unknown, if USAC can provide continued collaboration with professional teams, collegiate teams, or elite teams, that would go a pretty long way in making sure that athletes that go through the ODA have somewhere to go after the fact. Now, you're probably still wondering, so exactly what is offered in each semester? So one of the cool things about the ODA, as we're diving into the semesters, is that they could have just said we're going to take on just road. Like, we're going to do one discipline, road, maybe we're just doing a male program and just doing a U23 program. They could have done that. But they chose instead to start with 6 different disciplines, so pretty massive. So it's road, cyclocross, mountain biking, track, BMX, racing, and even BMX freestyle is on schedule for 2022. So each discipline starts with a training camp. So, and then from there, you go into different high-level events. And then discipline depending will then include more training camps later. So each discipline semester, which for 2021 has actually been compacted into a super semester, tends to vary quite a bit by discipline. They average anywhere between a little over 3 months to a little over 5 months. All programs cost the same, so without knowing super specifics, it's hard to know exactly how that worked out, like how each program and discipline start the same cost the same because they're pretty different. So the cost. Yeah, the cost. This has been something that has been talked about a ton online, and not necessarily in a positive light. But hopefully through this we can help make it clear where at least that cost would be coming from. So the cost of a semester is $7,500 for tuition, $2,500 for housing, and $500 for a one-time per year clothing fee. So that's $10,500 per semester. According to USAC, the ODA is not something that they will profit off of. So the cost associated with the ODA, hypothetically, is just to cover what the athletes will receive in the program. So with that, the tuition will cover what I listed earlier in coaching, expertise, training camps, races, support, and so forth. The housing will cover costs of living from within these programs, so in several different countries as well. So this may seem a bit out of reach for a large number of people, and at face value, it doesn't really feel accessible. That being said, USAC is offering scholarships for the ODA in hopes of making it inclusive and to affect a wider variety of athletes. So they are trying to get this more accessible and more doable by many, but this is an initial step within this program. So it is one of those things that I think they are figuring out, and as it grows, it should hypothetically become cheaper, hopefully. So now we have a better understanding what the ODA is. We can dive into the specifics and how you can use metrics, experience, and maturity to see when the ODA is the right pathway. So again, my 3 standpoints is metrics, experience, and maturity. So to start, let's go through what the race calendar is within the super semester. For simplicity's sake, and to not make this video 60 minutes long, I'm going to stick to the road discipline as my primary example. If you want more information on and specifics within other disciplines, you can find all that on the ODA webpage. The road program, to start, is broken up into 4 categories: U25 women, junior women, U23 men, and junior men. To start out, let's do the, all right, take a stop here. The road program is broken up into 4 categories: U25 women, junior women, U23 men, and junior men. The U25 women and U23 men. Both programs are 4 months long, starting with a pre-nationals camp in Tennessee that is in preparation for pro-nationals. In years past, elite teams have been invited to pro-nationals, but U23 athletes that have not had this opportunity, it can be a pretty big deal to race against America's World Tour riders and fight for the Stars and Stripes. So after camp and then after pro-nationals, both of those programs travel to Europe for a mixture of camps and races in both countries. Both calendars have athletes racing a mixture of stage races and single-day races that are UCI ranked and pretty well known at that. So diving into the criteria, so my 3 bullet points, let's start with maturity. The semester would require the U25 to be gone for 4 months in total. 1 in the US for pro nationals and 3 in Europe. This is a pretty big block of time out of the gate, so I would advise that the athlete have some previous experience in being away from home for an extended period of time, and then also having some international experience as well. Racing adds a pretty big stressor, and racing abroad is very different than racing in the US. So to have at least the experience of travel and knowing how to handle homesickness would be a big step up when signing up for the ODA. Maturity can vary from kid to kid, but I think most parents will have a pretty good insight into if their child would do well at a 4-month period away from home. So next is experience. Both women and men programs will be doing a stage race of 6 to 7 days long on the U23 side. For the men, the longest stage race is 6 stages long and is close to 700 kilometers total throughout. For women, the longest race is 7 stages long and covers 840 kilometers. Keep in mind, this is a development program, so riders would not necessarily be expected to win, but they should be ready for the demands of the event. As both teams will be taking part in pro nationals and pretty demanding stage races, I would advise that the athletes at the U23 program at least have a Cat 1 license and have already competed in a few 5-day stage races. U23s should be very confident with handling their bike in rough weather and rough roads. They should also be confident in racing in a field of close to 200 riders and experienced in a caravan. This is a pretty intense calendar, and while it still is a development program, I would argue that it's for athletes that are already well along in their development path and are truly focused on the next step and the professional ranks. So the junior U18 programs are a little different with a much more reduced race schedule. The male and female programs are quite different here, with the female calendar being even more reduced. Both programs will be taking part in Tour of America's Dairyland and Junior Road Nationals. The female program will then do Intelligentsia Cup, and the men will go to Junior Tour of Ireland. After that point, both programs will go to Europe, and the female program simply lists race and training camp in Sittard. While the men also have Sittard listed as well, they then hop to single-day races in Belgium as well as a stage race in France. For juniors, they can get away with a little less experience. Junior Nationals and Toad and Intelligentsia will be quite a few race days, but all crits. Right up front, which means that they will get a pretty fast experience. For category, I would advise juniors having a Cat 2-3 license and have participated in a few stage races as well as feel comfortable in criterium dynamic. The longest race the juniors will be competing in is the Junior Tour of Ireland, which is 544 kilometers through 6 days. So it is important that the junior can handle this distance and has raced, races of similar length at least. Europe is a different animal again, but it will always be a bit of a shock at this age and really any age. And I think as long as they are confident that they can handle the bike well and handle a variety of circumstances, I think they will handle this program very well. All right, now on to the fun stuff. Using metrics and other performance criteria to know if this program is right for you. In the past, USAC has had TTs at junior camps know how the athletes compare. But as power meters are becoming more and more commonplace among young athletes, I'm going to focus more on power metrics here. Not all juniors will use power meters, nor do I think that it is needed at that age. If you do not use power meter, then I would advise you primarily looking at the demands of each of the races and the duration and the terrain, and see if you can handle those demands in part in training. This should give you a pretty good indication of where you are at. To know that an athlete is ready for an event or the ODA's calendar, we need to look at the demands of the event. And in this case, we can go a little bit further and see if your power profile matches the demands. To do this, we could pull some peak metrics and lay them out to formulate a power profile from a specific event. Now, keep in mind that comparing power from one rider to another is tricky and not always as simple as apples to apples. There's a lot that can be at play. The differences between meters, weight of the riders, and so forth. But that does give us a good guide regardless. Oftentimes, we get caught up in looking at the winner's numbers, but as this is to see the demands of the race and to see if an athlete is ready for them, I will instead be looking at riders that finished around mid-pack. Let's start with US Pro Road Nationals for the U23 and U25 programs. The last edition of the race took place in 2019. This race was held in a very challenging Knoxville course, which will be the same course in 2021. It was extremely hot on the day, 95 degrees, and extreme high humidity as well. In the male race, on paper, only 40 riders finished the race. The power profile I pulled was from a rider in the male race who did finish. Within his peak metrics, you can see that it's a pretty challenging course, but bursty style of nature. His peak metrics were, a higher skew towards the 5 and 1 minute power. So this is important for riders to keep in mind. Those that are able to respond to those fast surges will do well in these courses. Next on the female side is rider 2. It's actually very similar within nature on her power profile. So on the junior male side, I put together a power curve from the U18 Tour of Ireland Stage 4. It's a pretty tough stage with a key climb in it. Again, this is a mid-pack finisher. Pretty impressive watts per kilo. This rider's fairly small in nature. But it's one of those things that if you are able to hit some of these markers, you can kind of use it to your advantage, and you should be in a good place. For junior females, as the biggest portion of the race calendar will be crits, I pulled a power profile from the women's P12 race from the Downers Av Crit in Toad. So this one was, again, fairly hot heavy on the high VO2 range and repeatability of doing so. So again, hitting high intensity and being able to hit that repeatable. It's important to remember that all racers race differently. So it's hard to know if these riders were racing conservatively or not, or if they were doing a job, or if they were having to do these efforts over and over again like we chatted about. But if an athlete is close to these efforts, then they will have the matches required to take part in these events and be ready for key race on the ODA calendar. To wrap up, for athletes or parents that are deciding whether or not the ODA is the right program for them, go through these 3 criteria: maturity, experience, and metrics. Ultimately, this can be a great pathway for the right athlete in the right stage of their development. If the markers of what we went through in this video apply, then I do think the ODA would be the right pathway. Thanks for tuning in, and see you guys next time.